The really fun part of a project that you're working on getting a lot more attention than you expected is that you get a lot of unsolicited comments, questions, and concerns. And I think I'm going to talk about some of those today. So, pretty much out the gate, I posted a question asking people to list off transmass script that they could recall. And that's what started really this whole project. Was like I had been planning beforehand, but I launched it by asking this question. And then I made the initial video with this question in the intro. And what that sort of sparked were, mm, I would say, a question, like a request of me, but also sort of a debate that people kept bringing up in the replies to me. And I think that both of those are worth talking about. The title is absolutely not clickbait because I am talking about this. So, one of the main things that people would say in reply to me is they'd be like, well, Soul, why is it that it's so much easier to find representation of trans women than it is of trans men? Like, why, like, and whenever you watch a video talking about the erasure of transmasculine people in media, almost always someone will follow it up by talking about the overrepresentation, or not over, but like they'll be talking about how trans women get a lot more representation than trans men, and that becomes kind of a thing. Like there was one I watched recently, and while like overall like very good video, very informative, very chill, the creator had phrased it in such a way where it was sort of like, and I really love that they're getting all this representation, but like we're not getting very much. And the thing that I want to do is kind of like I wanna hammer this nail down, because I don't think that this is a point that particularly helps this discourse or this conversation. What I think it does is it incites people to make it almost a competition or a debate between who gets, better representation, who gets more, who gets less, who gets more like offensive, and who gets more affirming. And I think the reality of it is that neither situation is great, but we need to talk about why I don't think that trans women get more representation than trans men. I don't think that they get more better or more thorough. I think that they're in a very similar boat to us, but I think that the forms of erasure are a little bit different. So, back when I first started looking into logging trans representation, I talked about this in my first video, but I was quite a bit younger. I was in my early 20s, and I was looking through specifically anime and manga, and I did find a fair amount with trans women, trans girls, and I found only one with a transmasculine character, and arguably Wandering Sun doesn't count, for reasons that I will talk about when I actually talk about Wandering Sun. Like, the anime itself, devoid of the manga, you could argue, sure, but like usually watching an anime will kind of get you interested in reading the manga, and then you read the manga and you find out, oh, that's what his story is. Okay, yeah. And like that's obviously not great. The one trans guy that I was able to find ends up like detransitioning and appearing very miserable about it, if we're honest. And like that's so comparatively in that situation, did it and then I guess I had Boys Don't Cry, which I'll talk about later as well, but like comparatively, did it feel like we had less by comparison? uh yeah, I understand where the emotion comes from. I understand exactly where that feeling stems from. When you're a young transmasculine person, you're trying to find stuff, and you can only really find stuff with trans women. The thing that's really important to note here is that trans women do face erasure in artwork, and like it is, instead of it being sort of like the erasure of their existence, what it is in what I've noticed is that they get talked about a lot and written about a lot, but typically not with their consultation. And then the stories that trans feminine writers will write about themselves or write about people like them tend to not get very much traction. And that is a form of erasure. And I think that that's what I want to talk about. A lot of what people recall when they think about trans women in movies and books and whatnot are actually pretty offensive caricatures. Like, Emilia Perez was, like, by no means a good movie, and highly offensive to both, trans women and Mexicans. And that one was very like it made a lot of headlines. People saw that, and like a lot of people who maybe don't see movies with trans people in them often will hear about movies like that, but they won't hear about, a movie like Boy Meets Girl, right? Because that movie wasn't very, very popular, but I found that movie to be like honestly a pretty good movie, right? But like those aren't the ones that people will know about. It's the ones that make big headlines where we we do know that the lead actress did have some role in how her character was portrayed, and that she was able to like um make some changes to the script, like subtle changes, but not a lot, because when you look at the source material for Amelia Perez, there was no trans woman involved in writing that character or in creating her, and it stemmed from initially a pretty offensive caricature in the first place. And that's a huge problem with it. And then you have like the kinds of gags that you'll see in movies like in movies like Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. There's one in there where there's a very offensive caricature as well. And then even in one of the Naked Gun movies, I believe it's the second one, there's a scene as well that like yeah, if you're associating that with trans women being seen in media, that's not great, because the whole joke is that like it's not even a joke. It's that they get revealed and the male lead goes and like throws up somewhere because he's disgusted or something. It's like, what is the punchline realistically, right? So I wouldn't consider that representation to any meaningful degree. In fact, I consider it like far more harmful than good. And the super unfortunate truth is that like yeah, to the untrained eye, or to someone who's looking for a transcript for the first time, it will probably feel like trans women get more representation, but I really don't think that they do. I think that they just get talked more about and not listened to because they're more visible, and that's not necessarily a good thing, right? And I think that the erasure that we face when it comes to representations of transmasculine characters is a little bit different, because like it goes very under acknowledged and very much not talked about, because it's just not like it's not even really seen enough to be talked about. Does that make sense? Because the whole like thing is that a caricature of a transmasculine person tends to fall into the category of a woman pretending to be a man for some kind of gain or whatever, and the story will use like the experiences of transness without ever committing to writing a trans character. And people never talk about these kinds of stories as, contributing to the erasure of transmasculinity or being offensive characters, because they'll just go, oh, well, the character's not trans, she's a woman, she's just in disguise. And then you have to, like, actually sit down and unpack that with someone before they realize that the idea of someone appearing like to be a man being revealed to be a woman, it must have been someone in disguise, because like why would she, earnestly want to be a man, right? So there's a lot to discuss there, and that absolutely is a trope that I plan on tackling in a upcoming video, and in ones like after that, because while the characters would not be characters that I would recommend as trans representation in the slightest, I think unpacking this trope is really important in like confronting the particular kinds of erasure that we face. And that's the biggest difference, right? Like in one case, the erasure is tied to visibility, making it kind of hard to realize that it is in fact a form of erasure. It's the erasure of trans women telling their own stories and their own voices being heard and that kind of thing. And then the other form of erasure is portraying us as like confused women to the point where people don't even acknowledge that those are portrayals of transmasculinity, butchered transmasculinity, like botched, not very well written, obviously, kind of caricatured, or our experiences used to tell a story for a cis audience without like ever committing to actually writing a trans character. So um it's just like they're both erasure. They're just different forms of erasure, but they both are, and I want to squash this debate that I've seen being had in my comment sections because I don't really think it's a debate. I don't think it's one that we need to even really have. I think that you can acknowledge the struggles of both of like well, both, I say. I think you can acknowledge the struggles of multiple different kinds of like trans experiences and representation. You can do that without trying to categorize them in a hierarchy of suffering, right? Like, there's not like a greater suffering or a greater struggle. Like, people who don't like trans people don't like any of us. People who, detest trans rep detest all trans rep. People who try to, like, say that, like, trans women like in media aren't really women, or that trans men aren't really men. People who will take like there's another like thing too, right? A lot of characters that are very clearly written to embody the experiences of trans women aren't even always explicitly written as trans women or girls. Like Forrest from Fire Emblem is a really good example. She's obviously a trans girl. If you look at how she's written, it's very clear, but she's not like explicitly stated to be that in the game. She's written that way without making it canon, and that's a choice. So people end up, you know what I mean, like calling characters like that femboys, which is not something that you should ever really be calling someone that's obviously written to just be a trans girl. Like, that's pretty highly offensive, I would say. But that's the thing that happens a lot. You'll have a character written like, if you just looked at how she was written by herself, you'd go, oh, that's a trans woman. Like, just like that's how the character's portrayed. But then the actual piece of media itself tries to tell you something different than what the character is written like. Like, the character is presenting as a woman or a girl, is, like, not correcting people who refer to her with she, her pronouns, seems more confident and happy with this, like, presentation, right? And then yet the media itself is just trying to say, like, oh no, this is just a feminine boy. And it's kind of similar with the women disguising as men trope. Oftentimes you'll have a woman who, well, a woman in quotes, who is disguising as a man, but then ends up he'll end up finding himself through masculinity, being more confident, growing as a person, uh, and then, like, at the end there's like a return to like womanhood, which doesn't really track with how the character has been written through his like masculine presentation, right? And through his like struggles with like his own gender and his place in society and gender roles and stuff. So they do use the experiences of trans people, but they never commit to just writing a trans character, and that affects both trans women and trans men in representation in media, generally speaking. And I really, really strongly wish that when people talk about this from either side of this conversation, that it would be more fully acknowledged, as opposed to this sort of weird campism that people tend to have, where they go, no, our side has it worse. And then instead of like listening to people with different but incredibly similar experiences, they try to sow a lot of division, when the truth is that a lot of the problems here are kind of overlapping. That's probably my biggest take on it. Agree or disagree with me? Now, this is more of a question or a request that I have gotten, and it has come from some people in replies, a couple colleagues, but I want to address it here. This is I'd love to see a project like what, you're doing, Saul, but focused on trans feminine representation. And to that, I would have to say, like I said in the very first video, you should check out the Trans Feminine Review, because she does do that kind of work. She does it specifically targeting the forms of erasure that trans feminine media faces, versus the way that I'm doing it, which is targeting a different kind of erasure. And if you like look at, and I'll link again her Blue Sky and her blog in the description, and from there, quite easily, you can find a lot of books and stories. You can find like a lot of books that have that are by trans women, and a lot of which will have trans feminine characters in them too. So check that out, because that is work that is being done. It's not work that I think I'm going to like fully commit myself to, and I'll explain why in a minute here. The way I explained it in my first video, but I'll try to be a bit more brief this time, is that it's like a speciality of focus, right? Like, I'm a transmasculine person. That is the kind of representation in writing and art that I want to focus on for the most part. It's the stuff that I'm going to connect to the most. It's the stuff that I'm going to have the most to say about. It's what I'm going to be able to, like, like, analyze and give more thorough, like, not so much feedback, but I'll be able to talk about it more thoroughly and more analytically. I'll be able to do that with this, whereas for trans feminine representation, I won't be able to do that quite as much. Now, I do intend to make a video at some point going through a few books by trans feminine people that I really, really liked, and I'll talk about them in a little bit more depth, and I'll recommend them. And specifically, I'll choose books for that video that are not ones that will be in the transmasculine literature media project, because some of them will be, because if they feature transmasculinity to any degree, then they will be in there. But if they don't, then I can't put them in that series, because that doesn't make any sense, right? But I can talk about them in a separate video where, like, they might be really good books that I want to talk about, and I just have to talk about them in something else other than that one particular series. I'm perfectly capable of doing that, and I will do that at some point when I get maybe 5 to 10 books that I want to talk about. I'll probably do that, but I'll list a few here and give some brief thoughts on them for people who are looking for that. You'll have some, like, right here. Some of them, if I'm going to talk about them later, I'll also clarify that too, so bear that in mind. And, like, the other thing too, right, is I just really haven't seen a lot of people dedicate an entire project or like a long videos. Like, I've seen very little dedication to talking specifically about transmasculine rep or literature or media or art, like, in anything. Like, I'll see it talked about, like, briefly, maybe in videos about broad trans discussions, but I very rarely see anything like laser focused on specifically this, which is why I'm doing it. I want something to exist that does this. It doesn't mean I don't want other things to exist, and it doesn't mean that I'm never going to talk about trans femme stuff or like non-binary stuff that doesn't quite fall into, my general category. I will, it just won't be in the main series of videos for this one specific project. Now, for like a couple books that either like I will talk about later, maybe some recommendations if you want to go check them out right now. One of the books that I'm currently reading is Grey Dawn by Neri A. Bakalian, and it's very good. It takes place in, I believe, it's 2026, so like kind of modern day, a little like a slight bit into the future, and then during the American Civil War. And it actually features a trope that I generally despise. It features the woman disguising as a man trope, but it's the one book that I've read so far that does so in a way where I'm actually enjoying it. And I think that it's like super well written. And I don't want to go too much into this book because I plan to make a video discussing it specifically, like for the Transmask like media project, because it does feature a couple of transmasculine characters, and they're kind of entwined with the historical POV. So anyway, without me saying too much more, it is a very interesting book. I'm enjoying reading it, and I will talk about this one much more later. A book that I actually helped publish this one. This one is Psychostorm by Moira Baird, and this one is a superhero, in a lot of ways, like superhero found family, and then of course it has, especially like once you get to around the midpoint, like it opens with a lot of action, and then around the midpoint at the end it has a lot of action as well. So I would say, yeah, superhero found family action. It was a very fun book to work on. I want it to get a lot more readership, not just because I worked on it, but because I think it's a very interesting book. It's got very interesting characters, and I'd love to know like what other people think of it, right? And I will talk about this one more in probably more detail, like when I make a video talking specifically about some books by trans women that I really like. This one will definitely be featured in that one, but I will of course link it below in the description if this sounds like something that you're looking for. uh like definitely go check it out. The main character is a trans woman and a superhero. Like that's a pretty fun jump off point, right? I'm also currently reading, I'm about halfway through this one, Lord of the Last Heartbeat by Mae Peterson. It is a, I would probably call this like a horror romance book. It's got a very interesting setting. The way that the magic is described in it is really interesting to me. And it has a lot of like interpersonal like relationship and uh magical horror and ghosts, and also it's a romance as well. And also it is a gay romance specifically. So this is one that I will probably like this whole series. Hopefully I can get through this in a good time. I've been having a hard time reading lately, but that's my own problem. But this whole series is one that I want to talk about like a little bit later in more depth. Again, when I talk about, books by trans women that I really like, this will probably be in that category too. Yeah. I have not read this book, but I want to read it. I want to read Sundered Moon by Faye Rin, so I'll be posting a link to that one as well. It looks super interesting. I know that it was like heavily, like it wasn't. It was at least partially inspired by Witch from Mercury, which was a really interesting Gundam anime that my partner, they didn't force me to watch it, but we watched it together. It's a really good anime. I had a good time. And then I'm like kind of part way through reading Shakespeare's The Tempest, which is what it was inspired off of. So I want to read Sundered Moon because I think that the game of Art Telephone is incredibly fun, and also it sounds like a really really fun book. Like where I'm expecting like mechs and lesbians and violence. I can't complain about any of that. This one I will be talking about specifically at some point in the TMLM project, but this one is A Loki Trade by Fern V. Bidek, and it's a very short book. It's very sweet. It's like kind of like mushy found family, but it's also kind of like Freaky Friday-esque with body swapping. And then I won't spoil the story, but it's like it's a closeted trans man and a eggy trans woman, and they body swap, and then it goes from there. And it was a fun read. I liked it, and I am excited to check out more by this same author. And I do know that a lot of her work generally features trans women, trans girls, so probably go check her out if you're looking for that kind of stuff. This next book will tie into a later point in this video, but I'll talk about it a little bit here. I have read Trans Rad Femme by Talia Bat, and I will talk about it at some point in a video for the Transmasc project, because it does talk about transmasculinity, and I have mixed thoughts on how the book does that. So I want to, dissect that, talk about it, and I want to open up kind of a larger conversation that some of the discourse around it has made me want to crack open and talk about. So I will be doing that. But as far as like a book about trans femininity that I could recommend, I think in particular the way that this book openly challenges like the Orientalism that you'll see in a lot of trans discussions, especially like that you used to see. Like it's still prevalent, but you definitely used to see it a lot, like I would say 10 years ago, when people were talking about like the way that other cultures had like third genders and stuff like that. This book does openly challenge a lot of that. I thought that it was very interesting, and for that I think it is super worth reading, even if like there are other like it's a theory book, right? It's a feminist theory book, so it's one of those things where you're not really supposed to read theory books because you agree with them. You're supposed to read them to let them challenge you, and to kind of like, whether you agree with them or not, if they challenge you in interesting ways as a reader and they open your mind to different perspectives, that makes them an interesting book. And this book really does that. And in particular, I think the two essays I liked the most were When the Doll Speaks and The Third Sex. Those were probably the ones that I think that the book is in particular very worth reading for. I will talk about my more complicated thoughts on some of the other aspects later, but that's not really for this video. But if what I've said about it sounds interesting to you, then yeah, go check it out. When I was younger and I was looking for trans rep, one of the movies that I did find and really liked was Boy Meets Girl. It's directed by Eric Schaefer, and I particularly enjoyed it for Michelle Henley's role as the lead character. So this one I wouldn't put in the category of created by trans woman because the director is, to my knowledge, a cis man. But I felt that the way, like, early 20s me at the very least, felt that the way that this story was paced out, was written, was presented, was very, like, empathetic to the trans lead character, and I liked watching it. So that's a movie that, like, I never see anyone talk about it. It's a pretty good movie. Maybe you might like it. And then another writer that I follow, who I read from, Danny Finn, often in a lot of their different stories, they will write trans feminine characters as well. So, and like multiple of their stories. So just go check them out. I will link to their Blue Sky in the description. And also, like, they repost and read and talk about a lot of other books featuring trans women or by trans women. So feel free to also check that out too, right? Like there are people who are doing the work that maybe like I'm not specifically doing, but like I see them as being on the same team as me. So I hope that if any of this sounded appealing to you, you can go check that out. And the ones that I said I'll talk about later, you know, hopefully if you're interested in what I have to say about them in videos where I'll be breaking down my exact thoughts on them, then yeah, stick around because I will get to that. Another question I got, this one is probably more of a concern, and it's people who are like, why are you tackling this book? And it's in regards to books that they either like find to be like quite poor or they have issues with the author. And I'm not really here to police that. Like if I'm covering a book that you think is like an offensive, like, waste of space, fair enough, I respect your opinion. If I'm talking about a book by an author that you think is like a horrible person, fair enough, I respect your opinion. I'm talking about this specifically because these pieces of media have transmasculine characters that talk about transmasculinity, and I'm simply analyzing that and talking about that as someone who, you know, is going through a bunch of these and like noting different trends, different like ways that we are discussed, presented, XYZ. And I want to go through, log that, analyze that, and work on a larger project focusing on this. And like a lot of the stuff that I talk about in this project will not be pieces of media that I personally even fully enjoyed or would recommend, right? Like there's lots of things that I'm reading for this that are very outside the scope of what I typically like reading. And that's fine. I'm choosing to do it. You know, like I'll maybe find things that I like that I otherwise wouldn't have read. That has happened too. But like, you know, for example, a lot of the stuff that I have to read for this is erotica. I'm not someone who typically reads erotica or can even really connect to it. I don't inherently dislike it. I don't think that it's like wrong. I don't have an issue with it. It's just not something that I as a reader typically seek out and want to read. But I do have to read a lot of it for this because a lot of the pieces of media that fall into what I'm talking about or feature the kinds of characters that I'm looking for, you know, will have that in there, and it's fine. Like, I'm expecting it, and obviously the more I read it, the better I'll become at sort of, you know, analyzing it as a piece of media, and I have help along the way if it's something really outside my comfort zone. I have people that I can talk to who do read this kind of stuff and who write it more, and you know, they can help me formulate how I want to talk about it, or I can feature them in videos so that they can get their perspectives on it where mine might be a little bit weaker, that sort of thing. But yeah, like, it's important to know that there are multiple pieces of media throughout this project that I'm going to be giving kind of critical responses to. Like things that I'll say, like, this was bad and I want to talk about why it was bad, or this wasn't bad, but I have a complicated relationship with it, and there was some things I disagree with, and I want to talk about that. So, like, that's how I'm going to handle a lot of these discussions, too. I definitely am not just going to be talking about things and going, oh, I, like, am recommending this, because there's things I'll be talking about here where I'll go, I'm not recommending it, right? Like, that'll happen as well. Because I want to talk about, like, the good and the bad and the mediocre with this. I want to have a broad scope of what I end up discussing. And so that means that, yeah, I probably will be discussing some books that some of you might not like. and I might have some things to say about some books that you might not like, and that's okay. You can disagree with that, but a lot of these are going to be my takes and my observations on these books and on these stories and on these, on these pieces of media, right? One little addendum here that I would like to make is that I do have boundaries on what things I will and won't talk about in this project, or generally on my channel. Like, for example, anything by Freydis Moon, not touching that. I don't care if they've written about transmasculine people. I don't care if they'll continue to. I'm not touching it because this is a person, this is an author who has caused a lot of harm to the communities that they were in. And like when it comes to like very serious like allegations like this, I'm not going to be talking about these people's works. But if it's just people who are like getting into arguments online, because like basically everyone does that, I don't really care. Like I don't like love every single book and author I'm going to talk about. But as long as they're not like, like so detrimental to their own communities that they're harassing like trans authors, or they're like brown facing stuff like that, that's really, really bad. If they're not doing that, it's, or like anything like quite as extreme as that, is a bit more gray area. So I'll probably be a bit more like lenient there and just maybe like not talk about the author's like online antics unless it's relevant to the subject I'm talking about. But if someone is crossing a line of ethics and boundaries, then yeah, no, I'm not going to talk about their work. Something I have gotten some kind of aggressive and concerned responses on from both random commenters and from some colleagues are people being like, so why are you sharing fundraisers for Palestine and Ukraine? The answer for that is like really simple. It's because people in war zones deserve support. Like it's not like I can't do a lot. I don't make a lot of money. I make enough to get by. I'm not rich. I can't donate thousands of dollars to help people, but I can share fundraisers, and in places where I have visibility and where, I'm making things people are going to watch, I can share these and I can talk about this and I can hopefully bring people's attention to it and be like, hey, maybe if you can donate like $5 or share these around, that'd be great. Show your support for people who are struggling. The other thing too is that like, if we're talking about like general, like speaking like trans stuff, LGBT stuff broadly even, like you do realize that there are trans people that live in Ukraine and there are trans people that live in Palestine, right? Like they're like, it's not like the only trans people that live in like Canada and the US. So caring about global issues like this, it's relevant. It's not like they're completely disconnected struggles. And like if you care about the struggles of your LGBT siblings, I think you should care about those struggles, in other countries too, where maybe there is war and there is genocide happening. And it's not that hard to just like say, hey, here are some fundraisers, donate if you can, share them around, please. It's a very small thing to put into a video and to ask. And if I'm honest, I think some people are making a bigger deal about it than they really need to. And on that, the fundraisers that I was sharing and that I will continue to share, and they'll be in this description too, is that of the Come Back Alive Foundation, the National Bank of Ukraine, the Serhiy Pertula Charity Foundation, the Palestine Children's Relief Fund, the Palestine Red Crescent Society, and Doctors Without Borders. And again, those are in the description, and if you can donate, if you can share, that'd be great. So thank you. And I just wanted to end this off by giving a sort of general like life and project update. So I struggled quite a bit to get that last video out. A lot happened in my life when I was planning and recording it. And I don't really want to go into a lot of detail because this is the internet and people are cruel, so you'll get kind of the bare bones minimum, like forgive me for that. But anyway, my sister had passed away last month, and that was while like I was taking some time off of work to try to get some creative work done, hang out with my family, and this all happened. And I don't want to talk about it in depth, but obviously it's been affecting me, and I was struggling a lot to press on, to do like anything creative and to work. And I'm feeling like I'm more like myself now. I might make something later in time talking about grief, because this is not the first time I've dealt with it, and it's a subject that I think deserves, some honest art and whatnot made about it, but this is not the time or the place. So that's why I've maybe been struggling to get things out, why I've been a little bit slower with getting some things out. But I'm doing fine. I'll be okay. It's just I'm I'm climbing back up to where I was or where I want to be, and productivity and mental health and stuff like that. And then as far as the project goes, in terms of like what videos I'm getting out when and whatnot, there's not really a schedule. It's like, when can I work on them? When can I make them? Um, like the main, like, so I do have a list of like the episodes I want to make and the order I want to make them, and I own all the books for them. So I've done my planning, and a lot of them I've already read, to be fair, and a lot of the stuff I'm already like part way through, if that makes sense. But because I have other people that I'm, including in videos to give like voice clips and whatnot, I need to like communicate with them, get their parts for the videos. If they need to read the subject matter, it's going to take longer because I have to send, like, they have to read it before then they can give me their parts of it, that kind of thing. So the more collaborative stuff will probably take a little bit longer, which is why I'm padding it out with videos for the same project for things that I'm covering predominantly by myself. So like, for example, the next one is going to be about Frank Kissstein by Jeanette Winterson, which is, it'll be an interesting video, but it will take a while to make because I need to finish reading Frankenstein, like the actual Frankenstein, not another fanfic of it. And then I need my co-host to read Frank Kissstein. And then I need to, plot out a video discussing Frank Kissstein. Then I need to kind of do double feature discussing Frankenstein and how, like I have a vision for it, but it will take a while, right? So before then, I want to talk about some things like maybe the character of James Kidd in Assassin's Creed Black Flag, because that falls into a trope that I want to really discuss as well for this project. So I'm already kind of working on and planning on that. I have another book I have to read on that because I want to make sure that I've got some of my history knowledge down. Like, I've been reading lots of articles and stuff and saving information, but it can't hurt to have all the information that I need to discuss it thoroughly. And then I want to discuss Blue Eye Samurai in a video like later, and I have someone I'm going to invite on to talk about that one as well. And that one will be predominantly myself like making it, and I'll get like a voice clip maybe from like one person. So like, it's highly possible that I'll get these videos out before I even get the Frank Kissstein video out. And I'll keep you updated on social media and on all my like posts on YouTube, and I'll do my best to like work on these, but I can't promise a timetable. I want to at least get one, like video out a month. But we'll see. We'll see how she goes. We'll see how she goes. I am continually working on it, but as a lot of these videos take like lots of research and planning, and also like I have to get like the visual references together and do the artwork and stuff like that. It's a lot of work, but it's work that I like doing. It's just with that and with everything going on in my life and the fact that I do work, not like quite a full-time job, but pretty much a full-time job, and then I also do some other like freelance work. I'm a pretty busy person, so I'm not doing this full-time, but I will do my best to get videos out at a reasonable pace for you. So thank you for listening to my rambling about some of the various, questions, comments, concerns I've gotten. If any of these were yours, I hope I have confronted them in a way that is satisfying for you. But you are welcome to comment below, and if you have more questions, comments, concerns, anything, I'll probably make another update video in the future discussing this. Like, after a few more videos for projects for, other discussions, I'll do another one of these for sure, responding to some, like, replies I've gotten and whatnot as well. Why not? Why not? And for any of you curious, the artwork that I have been working on in this video, the drawing that I was doing is a character of mine. His name is Lubomir Kovalchuk, and he is a character for a personal project, but also I'm playing him in a D&D campaign right now. He's very much inspired by 80s slasher thrillers, and I don't want to say much more than that because I am very much thinking of making a graphic novel about him. So, if I do that, then you'll see that too, don't worry. Well, have yourselves a great day, and thank you for watching. And then you have like the kinds of gags that you'll see in movies like Ace Attorney, or fuck me, in movies like Ace Attorney, holy fucking fuck. Um,